Welcome everyone to the Philosophy Film Club, and today's film club not as planned as we'd hoped. We don't have many callers, but today we're going to be discussing with Jeff Bolan, who kindly was going to be hosting this show on House of Cards, on the seasons of House of Cards, which, as far as I know, is about sort of political intriguing and stuff like that. Not that familiar with it, but I'm definitely curious to hear more about it. I do encourage anybody listening live. I know we got off a little bit late. So that's partly due to the fact that we were expecting callers who haven't arrived, unfortunately. Anybody who would like to join the call, please PM me, Patrick Chapman. You can get me from the Philosophy Film Club Facebook group. You can message in the actual event page itself. We will pick that up and we'll give you a link to get in and join the call. But yeah, for now, this is the Philosophy Film Club House of Cards season we're going to talk about. And Jeff, I know bugger all about the show, of course, but that be that as it may, I am fascinated by it because I know Adi has talked to me a little bit about it, and I've heard rumblings from other people, etc. I should really get round to watching it at some point. Although it is into, I believe, is it 4 seasons, I think.
Yeah,
five.
it's been renewed for season 5. Season 4 is out now, and season 5 will come out a little bit later.
Oh, okay, so that's yet to happen. So yeah, so yes, my noob credentials are official. But anyway, I'm curious. So yeah, give us a broad synopsis of the series and what's it about, who perhaps are the main characters, etc.
Certainly. First, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jeff.
Yes, of course.
Right. Again, my name is Jeff, and I live in the greater Chicago area. I'm a pre-medicine student at Northwestern University, and I'm also co-producing the independent horror feature Escape the Dark, a film about a haunted apartment, depression, and what's waiting for all of us in the dark. Feel free to go to Kickstarter.com, and if you just search for Escape the Dark, you'll find it easily if you want to know more. And just to give everyone just to give you a quick rundown, Pat, of what the series is about. Of course, House of Cards is a Netflix original series starring Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright. And the show chronicles Democratic Congressman Frank Underwood's ruthless climb to the presidency and the various obstacles he must overcome in order to gain and maintain power. This includes media figures, political opponents, disgruntled staffers, his health, his own wife, Claire, and even an assassination attempt. In its first season, House of Cards received 9 Primetime Emmy and 4 Golden Globe nominations, becoming the first online-only series to receive these major accolades. The show has continued to be a major contender among primetime dramas, with director David Fincher winning an Emmy for the first episode, and both Spacey and Wright taking home a Golden Globe. Reviews have become somewhat mixed since the latter half of season 2, but there's no end in sight yet. And as we discussed, season 4 came out this March, and season 5 is scheduled for release sometime next year.
Great.
Yeah. I'll just launch into my experience of the series and a couple of things that I've found interesting about it.
Okay.
I have to say, like we were discussing earlier, I think I went through the first season and a half of the show, and I let it fall by the wayside for a while until the group expressed interest in it, and then I decided to binge watch a lot of the episodes and catch up in time for the discussion today. And I have to say that I don't find it to be one of the more compelling series that I've ever seen. I will usually, when I've got it playing on my computer, I'll have Candy Crush or Free Cell going at the same time. But nevertheless, there is some interesting stuff going on in the series. Let's see. First of all, do you have any questions about characters or certain situations that interest you that they might find themselves in?
Well, I mean, just I guess would be who are the main characters, and what's I guess what's been their kind of journey through the series up till now, and perhaps keep it to the main characters.
Sure.
We don't have to go into detail about lots of them, but just perhaps some of the top two, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. The top three characters, I would say, of course, are both Frank Underwood and his wife Claire, again played by Spacey and Wright, and also Frank Underwood's chief of staff, Doug Stamper, who is played by I forget his name at the moment. Let me look it up here quick. Michael Kelly. Yeah. Right. So those are the main three characters, and Frank starts out when we meet him. He's a Democratic congressman, and like I said, Michael Kelly is Doug Stamper is his chief of staff, fiercely loyal to Frank, and that was actually kind of one of the things I was hoping to discuss with other people today, is where people think that loyalty comes from. He seems to look up to Doug. He seems to look up to Frank as sort of a father figure that he potentially never had, and is willing to go so far as to murder someone to keep Frank's name clean.
Right.
And I'll just give you a brief rundown of where these characters have been going during the series. Like when we first meet Frank, I said he's a congressman, and then I believe it's at the end of season 2. Toward the end of around season 1, season 2 break, he makes it in as vice president of the United States. By the end of season 2, he's concocted a series of machinations and deals that get the president to resign. And so at the end of season 2, he is now president of the United States. And so seasons 3 and 4 have mainly dealt with the challenges that he's having to deal with as he tries to maintain his power base. And it's here especially where I think the title of the series, House of Cards, is especially appropriate, because there are lots of characters in the series, of course, who are not afraid to stand up to Frank. And you really do regularly get the impression that this whole legacy that he's trying to build could collapse at any time.
Right. Which is, I guess, is very synonymous with political careers of many people. Right. Mm-hmm. It often is built on kind of shoddy grounds. I mean, I think of, without going drifting too far off the topic of the series, but I think of David Cameron, my own prime minister, who has been literally pilloried by his own party. And clearly you can see that he's taken some pretty bloody noses over the past year or so. And even now with the Brexit's vote ahead of us in the next few weeks or whatever. So yeah, it does political careers, relationships, that sort of thing. Interesting area, interesting way of framing it as a house of cards, because it kind of is, and it's you kind of get through it by the skin of your teeth, I guess, to some degree,
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more examples that come to my mind are with Teddy Roosevelt in the United States. After his first term as president, he tried to run again sometime later as a third party and was unsuccessful.
Right.
And then also not dealing with the political structure per se, but just with public figures having to maintain an air of non-controversy. Recently, we've heard that James Watson, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on in the discovery of DNA, is now selling his prize for money because he's been blacklisted due to politically incorrect sexual comments that he's made, just genetic differences within races that were not accepted by the greater community.
Right. Yeah, and I was interested. You said there was I can't remember the character's names off the top of my head. I should have noted it down. But you said there was a character that was very supportive of Frank.
Yeah, Doug Stamper is his name.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And he was would you he obviously went his loyalty was almost was bountiful or was unboundless or whatever the word is. I can't think. He was committed to his loyalty to Frank, I presume. Yeah.
Certainly, throughout I think that's one of the perpetual questions that the series is trying to keep going here, is just where this fierce loyalty comes from, why he is so willing to do Frank's dirty work in order to keep him in office. As far as I can tell, the series hasn't been very clear on those motivations. Like I said earlier, I would imagine it comes from him just wanting to win approval from some older father-like figure.
Right.
The series isn't explicit about their ages, but you can tell looking at them that Frank is it definitely is quite a bit older than Doug is.
Right. So their age differences sort of would match the kind of father-son kind of analogy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Another thing about Doug is there's another character, and her name escapes me, but she was essentially an unofficial pawn that Frank and Doug used to get certain dirty work done. But then she, at the end of season 3, she escapes from Doug's grasp. Doug acts as her handler, and she escapes from him and injures him so severely, which actually it appears that she has killed him, but it was just a very serious strain of injuries that he suffered. He has to go through lots of PT and rest and rehabilitation in order to get back to work, but he's still so eager to get back into the office that I think at one point he breaks his arm trying to take a shower, slips in the tub and breaks his arm, but splints it himself and still comes into the office to see Frank and see what he can do that day.
That is fierce loyalty, yeah. I always find it interesting, that kind of fierce loyalty. I mean, it's not an unusual thing. I think whenever I think, I mean, I'm kind of thinking just about the way people act in that particular situation, just not from this particular series perspective, because I don't know the story or the characters that well, or at all, but I'm always curious that fierce loyalty that, and you talk about the age disparity thing, it does seem to be something more than just loyalty for loyalty's sake. It does always seem to be about managing their own self-esteem or something to that degree.
Right.
And also, but on the flip side, like from Frank's perspective, if you're an evil person, you can use these people. I mean, these people are kind of like just they can be used and abused in a sense. And just that does Frank is there any sort of example of him using Doug in this manner, like in for evil purposes, or maybe it doesn't bother Doug. I don't know. Maybe it does, but just curious.
Right. And actually, looking up on Wikipedia, I just figured out the other character's name who I was talking about. Her name is Rachel, and she's a prostitute that Frank and Doug used to bring about the downfall of another congressman who's getting in their way.
Right.
Right. And afterward, like I said, they want to keep her under control. So Doug is acting as her handler. But then when she escapes, she becomes too much of a liability. And so under Frank's direction, Doug tracks her down and plans to murder her. And I believe it's just about the entire episode, the entire season finale of season 3, that you see him interacting with Rachel as he's kidnapped her and he's going through all this moral confusion about whether to let her go or whether to murder her and dump her body in the desert. And eventually he sets her free, and she sends her in the other he starts driving in the opposite direction while he starts driving in one direction. She's walking in the other direction toward a town that was some, I don't know, 20 miles away or so. I think he told her. But then he stops the van, turns around, drives toward her again, and then there's just a very stark jump cut to him shoveling dirt over her body in a grave.
Right. So that was one thing that Frank got Doug to do, I presume. Then, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty evil. Yeah. And of course, he did it without flinching, I guess. So what was his? What do you think? Doug's. I mean, I guess you've kind of already said that you're a little unclear what Doug's motives were behind. What do you think? What's his back life like? His family life, or in the story? I'm thinking, what's maybe some elements of it that might have a relationship with why he does all these dreadful things, but also with the fierce loyalty, etc. Is there anything that's happened in the back seasons that gives a hint as to what his history is like?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. It's actually just the lack of interaction that we see him having with basically anybody else except for Frank and Rachel and White House staffers or other politicians. He appears to be extremely distant from his family of origin, and so I think it's probably more than anything, it's his desire to want to belong somewhere, and so Frank is his surrogate family, and this is the niche where Doug fits in.
Right, and it's very clear then that he doesn't really have much family, or he doesn't have much to do with them, etc.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. At one point, his I believe it's his brother. Like I said, I don't watch the series too attentively to really pick up on where some of the minor characters fit in. But I believe it's his brother comes to visit him and help keep things in order while Doug is recovering from the injuries that Rachel dealt out onto him, and Doug remains very aloof and confident that he can take care of himself, at first at least, and then I think as things progress, he becomes a little bit closer to his brother and his brother's family, but after he recovers and they leave, there's really no mention of them at all. I think in the latter half of season 4.
Right. So yeah, it does often. It comes this fierce loyalty. I think, particularly. I mean, fierce loyalty always seems like a. I mean, I think loyalty is a great virtue personally, but of course, loyalty to good people, right?
Sure.
His loyalty was to at least from the way you described it, was to a seemingly quite evil person,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Actually, yeah. And we also find out in again, I wish my memory were a little sharper on this, but I think I believe it's in season 1 where Frank actually carbon monoxides the other congressman who they were using Rachel to try and get him out of their way.
Rachel was the prostitute, right?
Rachel's the prostitute.
The
one that Doug murdered on Frank's order. Well, in season 1 also, once this congressman, his name is Peter Russo, by the way. Once Congressman Russo has begun to make a mess of himself, there's a sequence where he and Frank are driving home. Well, Frank is driving Russo's car, drives him into the garage, and when he sees that Frank is or when Frank sees that Peter is passed out drunk, he very carefully wipes down the interior of the car and then uses Peter's finger to turn on the car again. It's a push to start car. Uses his finger to turn on the car again, and then gets out. He wipes down the door handle and everything, and then it shuts the garage door, effectively poisoning Peter and taking his life. And then also in the second season, Kate Mara's character, Zoe Barnes, she's a reporter who had been doing some work with Frank, and also having sex with him on the side. She begins to suspect that Frank is behind that murder, and so without even a second thought, they meet up in a subway, which was obviously a big mistake on her part. They meet up in a subway, and without even a second thought, as soon as Frank understands that she's suspicious, he pushes her in front of the next oncoming train.
Right.
And obviously, since the series is continuing and he's president, he's gotten away with both of these murders.
Right. Interesting. So, I mean, going back to Doug's history, I know you said that there wasn't much interaction with his family. Was there any indication about his about anything that might have caused him to have this kind of, well, I think what we could call it is a kind of blind loyalty, right? I'm just always curious, because it seems those characters don't act in malevolent ways just literally out of nowhere, I guess perhaps there is this kind of idea that people their thrill to power is so intense or whatever, or that maybe they'll just lower themselves to anything. But I don't think any story of any meaningful content would necessarily just allow this kind of allow that kind of gap in understanding of a character. I mean, I tell you, I go back to another great series, The Sopranos, for instance. I mean, right. You kind of understand with Tony Soprano, without going too much, but you understand with Tony Soprano how he became the man that he became, given the dreadful, awful woman of a mother he had, Of
course.
And you sort of understand the sort of seething rage that came from that. Now, I'm not suggesting that's true of Doug, of course, I don't know, but it's just, was there any kind of inkling why he could be so pathologic? I mean, it's almost psychopathic, right? It's just, yeah. Well, he's sociopathic in the sense that he's just killing people here.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I can't remember anything else that was revealed in Doug's backstory. But it's interesting that you did bring up the mother angle, because we do find out that Claire's mother is an extremely poisonous matriarch, and when she is taken ill, Claire's mother is played by Ellen Burstyn, by the way. And when she's taken ill in season 4, and Claire goes to visit her, we see multiple times the mother insulting Claire and telling her that this is also at the same time that the assassination attempt is made on Frank.
Right.
And we see Claire's mother tell her that, "I hope Frank dies," which is very very direct about that. And so while we don't know a whole lot about Doug's parents, we do know a lot about Claire's mother, and it's clear that Claire gets a lot of her sociopathic tendencies from her.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Was there any other characters that you felt were of interest that you that kind of broadened the series, made it a little bit more interesting?
I think Frank and Claire do continue to be the main draws of the series. Certainly Frank more so than Claire, because Kevin Spacey, obviously. One of the interesting things that I definitely didn't expect when I started watching the series was there are, even though Frank is a totally wretched, horrible person, and I absolutely hope he gets what's coming to him at the end of the series, I nevertheless do find myself on some level hoping that he'll get the upper hand on certain other characters in the series. And part of that, I think, is because we see a lot more humanity in Frank. We see him get angry. We see him get upset and sad at certain times. Meanwhile, Claire, Robin Wright's character, is almost completely consistently even-keeled and even more frightening in that respect, because she's helping Frank do these horrible things, but with a totally emotionless and flat demeanor most of the time.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question about evil characters in series and how we kind of warm to them, because, and I think you make a great point, is because we see them in all of their, we see them in their vulnerable states as well as we see them in their confident states. We literally see them in every state they are. And of course, these side characters, etc., we don't always, we perhaps only ever see them in one state, or maybe a couple of states, maybe three, at most. And it reminded me a little bit, going back to Tony Soprano, he's another one, a character that, whilst the guy was just stone cold evil,
right?
But yet you kind of had this kind of warmth towards him, because you kind of saw him in so many different states of mind,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you saw him taking care of his son and his daughter. You saw him break down in therapy. You saw him cry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you see him feeling anxious, fearful. You see him being angry. You see, righteously angry at times. And of course, with all the other characters, you don't see that. So you get kind of like blindsided by this kind of intense relationship that you have with the main character. It doesn't surprise me that we kind of gather a certain amount of warmth for the main characters. I mean, I guess we have to, otherwise the series becomes kind of redundant to some degree. I mean, if you're just going to think you want to kill off the main character every episode, then it's not really going to be such an interesting series, of course.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. There always has to be something that keeps you coming back to make you interested in what's ultimately going to happen to this character. I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a cop movie that came out a number of years ago. It's called Gang Related.
No, I'm not familiar with that. No.
Yeah, it's really not good at all, in my opinion. It has James Belushi and Tupac Shakur, and these guys they play two police detectives, and they're just two of the most horrible characters you could probably ever imagine in a movie, and it just felt like the screenwriter sat down with an axe to grind and said, "I'm going to write a story about two crooked ass cops who get theirs." And of course, consequently, it's not very interesting, and I couldn't even watch the entire movie. I think I made it about 20 minutes in.
Yeah. I mean, if it's all, if you have got to have that kind of break in the. Whilst you might be building up a malevolent character, but you do have to kind of have that intimacy that's to their inner world, a little bit, I mean, there was another cop show actually years ago called The Shield.
Oh, yeah.
Another one that was actually quite not a bad show, actually, if I remember rightly. It's a long time, I think it's 2004, I think.
Yeah.
That show is quite old now. But yeah, that was another one, interesting one. I haven't seen the one you talked about, but yeah, there was some kind of warmth of character with, I can't remember who the main guy was now, but
it was Michael Chiklis as Vic Mackey. Vic Mackey was
Vic Mackey, yeah, that's it, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm actually glad you brought that up. I just finished. Let's see. I picked up The Shield again a few years ago, and then I finally got around to picking it back up again and finishing it, I think just late last year. And and the same thing as Sopranos. You've got these strike team characters who are doing some really crooked, illegal police work, but then we see all sides of their personalities too, and we nevertheless do sympathize with them on some level. And that's another series that I think ended appropriately, where Sure, we get where a lot of these guys are coming from in some regard, but they don't deserve to be let off the hook in the end, and so they do end up getting their just desserts in some fashion.
Yeah. So is there anything else? I mean, we don't seem to have any biters for callers, unfortunately. So sorry to anyone who is listening or anyone listening to the podcast afterwards. Was there anything else that kind of like what you kind of felt you wanted to sort of talk on with this House of Cards?
There is one more major topic that I thought was interesting, and it has to do with Frank and Claire's decision not to have children. This comes up multiple times in the series, whether or not they regret having children, and for the most part, it doesn't look like they do. It doesn't look like they have any plans to start a family, and of course, Claire is getting up there in age, so her physical ability to have kids is now extremely limited. What seems to be going on is that they're concerned about building a legacy for the United States and for their own names down the line. They want to be remembered. They want to go down in history as something, and the best way that they felt to do that was to just make as many smash hit changes in the political structure that they could versus carrying on their genetics somehow. And Frank, of course, is very aware of his own mortality. It's either season 2 or 3, I think, where he visits the site where his great grandfather was killed during a battle in the Civil War, and he takes off. I believe it's his class ring. Either West Point or high school class ring, buries it at the site where that happened. And of course, Frank's health comes into question a couple of times. He tries to keep up with some physical activity with the rowing machine, but you can tell that he could still stand to lose probably 15 to 20 pounds at least. And also the assassination attempt on him that it's a last-minute liver transplant that saves his life. So he came within inches of disappearing into the abyss, and so I think his mortality is definitely a driving factor in why he's so hell-bent on solidifying his power base and putting some massive programs and massive changes into the United States political structure. He launches essentially a new deal, which he calls America Works, and it's a government-sponsored program to create jobs and get more people out into the workforce. But the especially interesting thing is, and I'm glad I remembered this just now because I forgot to write it down, is that during the speech where he talks about his plan, he says more than once to the audience that you are entitled to nothing. You are entitled to nothing. And he talks about cutting Social Security and all the various government pension programs, benefits, so on and so forth, and using that money instead to put America back to work, in his own words.
Right. Which leads me to an interesting, interesting question more about what's contemporarily what's going on in the US at the moment with the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I'm curious if the last series, if you thought it had any kind of, and maybe this will be more for the 5th season, perhaps. I'd be curious to see how this particular election cycle, what effect it might have had on. But do you think it had any effect on the 4th season at all, or is that perhaps I'm shooting in the dark there a little bit too ahead of my time or something? But I'm curious.
Yeah, it's possible. I can't say that I've noticed really anything explicit, and like has already been, as has already been made clear, they've sort of flipped the good guy bad guy roles in the show already. We've got a Democrat as the bad guy, and from not every Republican in the series, but from time to time the Republicans are the ones trying to instigate some more control and bring things back to I guess to a more quote moral, ethical government.
Right. So in that respect, it's not partisan, right, at all. The series, it's very kind of mixed.
Yeah,
it's political affiliations.
I think very mixed and very egalitarian, which was definitely a refreshing facet.
Right. Yeah. I think that's sort of. I think if it's sort of, I think being partisan is it's not necessarily such a good thing, particularly in stories about politics, etc. That's why I particularly liked when Wag Dog, which Adi and Gabriel did last year, was I found that was I don't know if you actually saw that or listened to the podcast at all, but that seemed very unpartisan as well. It was very much, this is just political shenanigans, right? Left or right,
Sure,
so,
it's the kind of thing that everybody does it.
Right.
And also in the fourth season, Frank's major opponent is a Republican opponent. That is, he's a former Air Force pilot, I believe, and I think the very first time that he meets Frank, which is shown in a flashback, sometime after we've met the character, he reveals that he had political aspirations from the get-go. And then when 9/11 happened, he says the timing couldn't have been better. I signed right up, and so that's part of my legacy. Part of my platform is that when my country called, I went out and fought the good fight, and now I'm ready to continue leading.
Yeah.
And of course really in the last 2 to 3 episodes of this past season of season 4. That's when we start to see a really wretched side of him come out, because as the race is not going as he anticipated, and Frank starts to gain some more support among the greater constituency. What was his name? His first name is Will. We see Will start to lash out at his wife and his kids.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, Will, what's his setting in the characters here? Just because I'm not aware of it.
He's the governor of New York State in the series, and he is Frank Underwood's primary Republican opponent for the White House as the next election approaches.
Okay. Well, interesting. So I don't know if we probably should bring it to a close. I don't think I certainly haven't got much more to ask you of it. I certainly will at some point get to watch some of it. I think maybe the more important seasons, etc. But but thanks, Jeff. I mean, apologies that it didn't turn out the way we hoped, and we didn't get a lot of listeners, callers rather, should I say. But it happens. So just to let people know our future stuff, we are probably going to be doing a excuse me, we're probably going to be doing a Game of Thrones session, a listener hangout, probably a week or so after the series ends. We're so people haven't watched it and they don't want spoilers, and don't listen to the hangout. That's all I can say. But I think we probably will do. I'm not so happy with this season. I don't know what you think, Jeff, if you're at all interested in it. Oh, you are actually. I know you are. But what were your quick thoughts on it?
I think the series has maybe one good season left in it. I find that once they get around season 6, season 7, they start to become long in the tooth, and starting to lose patience with the good characters who are left around, and I just want to see the villains get their, I just want to see them killed in battle, executed, imprisoned, whatever. Let's bring this to a close. It's been 6-7 years, okay?
Yeah, I hear there's 2 more seasons after this one,
okay.
At least. But yeah, so who knows what goes on after that? But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I definitely I mean, depending on the writing, they often can lend itself into a sixth season just about. But like you say, going beyond the sixth season tends to be, like you say, long in the tooth. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, I thought the last episode, episode 7, wasn't so bad as the previous 2 to that. So I was kind of buoyed by that. So we'll see. But anyway, listeners out there, you're welcome to join us, of course. Just hit us up on the Facebook group. Our Facebook is, what is it? Facebook.com/Philosophy Film Club as one word, and you'll find us there. But yeah, thanks, Jeff, again for this, and look forward to having you again. As usual, your insight and interest in movies and TV series is always great to listen to, and thanks again, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to contribute, and thank you for letting me take the lead on this one.
No problem, man. Another time.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone, or good day, good morning, whatever.
All right.
Speak soon.
Take care.